Hey there, today we're going to show you how we built this storage cabinet for our bedroom with a pretty cool design. The first step was creating a 3D rendering. Here's our first design. We had to make sure that it was narrow, that way we could get in and out of bed without any issue when we walked past the cabinet, and also we had to make sure that we left room at the bottom of the cabinet because we have an air return vent right here on the wall. For the second design, I minimized the gap at the top of the cabinet, but realized it just wasn't that functional, so in the third design, I just brought the cabinet all the way up to the top, and this maximized the amount of storage. So now that we have our design, let's go build this thing. Now that all three boards are cut to length, we can go ahead and start cutting our miters.
So we wanted to add a little something to this piece, and instead of leaving the edge just flat like that, we decided to add a bevel cut. And instead of just doing your classic 45-degree bevel, we decided to leave this little strip here, and we really like how that looks, and it also softens the piece. And by we, I mean Grant, because I'm too scared to use the table saw. So we're currently cutting the shelves for the cabinet, and we get to use Grant's fancy track saw, which I've never used before, so he taught me how to do it. So you want to put the track saw in the middle of this track so it doesn't go off kilter when we move the saw. Then you're going to place your hand here and apply pressure, and then move the saw back because you don't want to start the saw on the middle of the piece of wood. Then I'm going to raise the saw, get it full torque, and then push it all the way down, and then push it across. Easy peasy.
Good job. The track saw makes light work of all this plywood. If you don't have one, you can use a circular saw with a guide, but if you are gonna be building a lot, I would highly recommend investing in one. They're a great purchase and makes these cuts really easy. With all of the pieces now cut, we could begin assembly. For this, we decided to use wood glue and brad nails to secure everything rather than screws because this is 1/2-inch plywood and I didn't want to risk splitting any of the wood. We started by first assembling the outer perimeter of what will eventually make up all of our shelving. Now before installing any of that interior shelving, we're actually going to add the backer board, which is made up of 1/8-inch yucca board, and this will help to ensure that outer perimeter stays square and doesn't rack at all during assembly. From there, we could finally start adding our shelving on the inside of the cabinet. Now there's a variety of ways to do this, and we opted to just nail our shelving directly to the sides of the cabinet and kind of go piece by piece, making sure to add glue and nails as we went. And for those of you that are wanting to build this specific cabinet for yourself, I'll make sure to include all the dimensions and details down in the description.
You think it'll fit?
Yeah. I think you're gonna have to use nails like up that top left to make the boards flush.
With all the shelves now fully installed, we did notice that we had a couple gaps between the layers of plywood, so we mixed up some Bondo to fill in all those seams. Once all the gaps were full, we could let it dry and then give it a quick sanding to make everything nice and flush.
Now it's time for the final cut, the doors.
It's now time to install the hinges onto the doors and then the doors onto the cabinet. As you can see, I already did the left and middle door, and now I'm going to show you how to do the right side door. You may have already seen the video series I created about building a bar in the basement of my family's lake house. If you want a lot more detail on building cabinets and installing door hinges, go check out that video, but I'm still going to cover a little bit here. For this process, I'm going to be using a Craig jig. It makes life a lot easier. I'm also making sure to put a piece of wood underneath the door that I'm drilling the hinge out for so I don't have any blowout. I'm making the top hinge 3 inches from the top of the door and the bottom hinge 4 inches from the bottom of the door. Once we have the jig aligned, we can go ahead and clamp it into place. Now I'm going to take a 1/16 inch drill bit and drill out the 2 pilot holes. And now I'm going to install the Forstner bit that comes with this jig. And this will drill out the main hole for the hinge. And there we go. We have our hinge drilled and the 2 pilot holes. And you might be thinking, you just drilled all the way through the cabinet, but we're going to be putting pull wrap on the front of this so it'll all be covered up anyway. And now we just repeat that process for the bottom hinge. Here we go, both of our hinge slots are nice and cut in the door. Now we need to install the other half of the hinge inside the cabinet. Now for this process, I create what I call a story stick, which is the same height as the door, but obviously it's not the same width. And this basically goes inside the cabinet where the door would go, and this allows you to mark the opposite side of the two hinges on the inside of the cabinet. Now because these are the only hinges in stock at Home Depot, these hinges are actually meant for cabinets with a face frame, and this obviously doesn't have a face frame. So we're going to have to offset the hinges, and for that we use some leftover Yucca board. We'll place these in here like so, which offsets the hinge the correct amount so that the cabinet sits in the proper position. Now that those are installed, we can go ahead and put our story stick back in position. That looks good. Now we need to mark the positions of where we need to drill our screws. Now we can take off our story stick and put in our door. Now we can screw the side leg onto the rest of the cabinet. So I'm gonna make sure that it's flush up here, and then I also stacked a few boards to get it to the right height so the cabinet sits at the right depth relative to the side piece. And then we can go ahead and screw it in. Now that the sides and top of the cabinet are installed, we can go ahead and start cutting our pull wrap. The widest I could find this was 16 inches, so I had to cut it into different sections to make it fit the entire width of the cabinet and cover all 3 doors. So now we're in the final stretch. I'm about ready to glue up all of the pull wrap onto the 3 doors. I laid it out as best I could and tried to hide all of the gaps and seams between the 3 doors. I had to make some compromises here and there, but overall I'm pretty happy with it. It is a little bit stressful to glue everything together, but I will have some working time with this particular glue, and I think I'm gonna pin nail it in place. That way the glue can dry with everything in the exact location I want it. The key thing you want to watch out for in this process is making those seams between the doors as tight as possible so you can't really tell where the pull wrap starts and ends, but also wide enough that you can still open the doors without any friction between them. Wow, this is turning out better than I could have expected. So now I'm just going to give it one more last sanding, bondo a few holes here or there, and then we can start priming and then painting. Let's get to it. All right, everything is prepped. Let us spray. Before spraying the cabinet, I made sure to label all the doors and all the hinges, that way everything could go perfectly back in place. The reveals and tolerances on this cabinet are key to making it look just right, and that's the reason that we installed the pull wrap after installing the doors, that way we could get everything perfectly aligned, and also these hinges allow for even finer adjustments if you need to make them. Now after all that hard work, the cabinet is finally complete and we can move it into position. We are so happy with how this project turned out. It fits in our space so well, and we achieved both form and function without having to compromise either of those, which is pretty rare when designing furniture. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, we'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like, and also subscribe for more DIY projects like this one. In our next video, we're going to be doing a time-lapse of the start-to-finish process of completely renovating this primary bedroom, so we're really excited to share that with you guys, and there are some things you haven't even seen before, so stay tuned for that one soon. I'll also make sure to link all of the products and tools that we use throughout this video down in the description, as well as all of the dimensions and details if you want to build this yourself. If you have any questions about the build, please leave them in the comments below and we'd be happy to answer them. And as always, thanks for watching and happy building. See you next time.